Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest on today's show is Dr. Megan Rose. She has a doctorate in East-West psychology, a master's in religion, is an initiated ceremonial magician, a Shakta Tantric practitioner, and the senior seer at the House of Bri Theory Seership Institute. Dr. Rose also serves as an ordained interfaith minister and psycho-spiritual counselor and is the executive director of the Entheosis Institute. I'll be talking with Dr. Rose about her book, Spirit, Marriage, Intimate Relationships with Otherworldly Beings. Dr. Megan Rose, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Hi, Stan. Wonderful to be here today.
Your book, Megan, explores the practice, relevance, and purpose of spirit marriage around the world. How exactly would you define spirit marriage?
Great question. Both of those words, spirit and marriage, I use as sort of the broadest terms I could think of to encompass a variety of different states and experiences and beings. So spirit is sort of an umbrella term for anything that is not incarnate in a physical human body at this time. So that could be deities, angels, elemental beings, ancestors, beloved dead. And then marriage is this idea that we can have committed, loving, bonded relationships with these beings that are deep and profound, much like our human marriages require some work. And there are some other terms that are used for in place of marriage: God spousing or God spousery, indwelling, co-walking, and merge are some of the other terms that I've heard used. But I like the term marriage because people can really hang a hook on that pretty easily.
In your research, Megan, what evidence have you found regarding the practice of spirit marriage historically, anthropologically, and in religion, folklore, and contemporary accounts?
It shows up transculturally, meaning all around the world. And from the very first written records, I mean, the first written account I found dates back to ancient Mesopotamia and the Sumerian sacred marriage, right? So we have the priests and the priestesses of the goddess Ishtar who are married to her and who have a consort type relationship with her. And that just extrapolates out exponentially. You saw it in ancient Greece, in China, India, the Americas. I mean, it's just shows up in folklore. Obviously, when they're talking, when the folklores are talking about a human who mates with an otherworldly or an extraordinary being and then gives rise to this sort of like hybrid kind of humanity. For those of us here in the West, we think of the accounts of the Virgin Mary and her mating with this, some say God, some say an angel, some say the Holy Spirit, and giving birth to the Christed one, or a Christed one, I should say. And even before that, in the early Genesis accounts, in the Enochian texts, you have that lovely little scripture that says, "And the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took unto them wives." And that's generally understood that the angels, the watchers, saw the human women and married them and had all sorts of exciting adventures that was part of that mating.
How does spirit marriage differ from channeling or possession?
I think of it as kind of a spectrum. I think channeling and mediumship and possessory state experiences where someone is allowing a spirit to come in for a defined period of time, as in like channeling or possessory states, or mediumship where you're having a conversation with a spirit. Those are sort of certain phase of spirit communication. And spirit marriage, I think, is, kind of down the road. You've dated a bit, you know the spirit that you're working with, you know, like, and trust them. Maybe there's a love relationship that is involved, or what I would more aptly describe as a devotional relationship with them. And a marriage is proposed, usually by then. I mean, the folklore and the apology, if it's not sort of part of a tradition that you're practicing, it's often at the behest or the request of the spirit that the marriage is proposed. So then the marriage is this advanced, in some cases, an advanced practice where you're really stepping into a very deeply bonded co-creative relationship with a specific entity or entities, and you have a purpose. There's a reason. You've come together to do some sort of specific work together.
For what reason or reasons would anyone want to marry marry a spirit? And if they did, what benefits would they derive from it?
The reasons, I think, for contemporary practitioners may be a little bit different than for early practitioners of this. Sometimes the marriage happened because it was sort of foisted upon you, or it was part of an initiatory tradition, like in the examples of the priests and the priestesses and devotion to a specific deity that they're in a committed relationship with and serving, or in a devotional relationship with. I think for contemporary practitioners, it really comes down to the being that you're working with. Not all otherworldly beings have the same function or the same agenda or the same mission. And so one might marry a deity because that you are being asked to bring forth a certain knowledge stream or to progress a lineage stream. For example, in my research, I interviewed a Shakta Tantric practitioner who's married to the goddess Kali. And she stepped into that marriage because she had been in a kind of devotional relationship with this deity, with this goddess, and she was being asked to teach. And she was being asked to sort of take the lineage that she carried from North India out into the world. And that marriage to Kali really earmarked her stepping more formally into the role of a guru or a teacher. So that's one outcome. I mean, in my own case, it's been the birth of this book, which was originally the kernel of dissertation research that I spent 10 plus years working on, and then turned into this book. And it's sort of like getting this material out into the world. But folklorically, sometimes the accounts describe the evolution of extraordinary or extrasensory gifts that a human, that is the outcome of the marriage. And sometimes it is supernatural sort of powers that one has sort of awakened or activated in themselves, gifts of prophecy, gifts of poetry, gifts of charisma or eloquence, healing gifts. All of these can be a byproduct of one of these committed unions. And you see that really almost in every instance, that the human is quickened, is activated, is changed as a byproduct.
Is there an appropriate time to go forward with a spirit marriage? How does it happen? What are the dynamics involved?
Great question. It really depends. I would say that for most of the folks that I interviewed, their marriage happened because that the spirit asked for it. The spirit said, I want to marry so-and-so, either directly to the person themselves, or and what is often sort of a indication of a sort of validated marriage is when the spirit appears to somebody like a mentor or a minister in that person's lineage and says, I want to marry this person. And then they're sort of like, okay, will you marry this spirit? Usually there's something that they need to bring to the community, and that union with the human and the spirit can bring that unique gift to the community. For example, Madrone, who works in the West African Dagara tradition from Burkina Faso, she was asked to marry a spirit called Tingan, who in their cosmology is the earth spirit that represents sort of the masculine aspect of earth, which oversees a variety of different things, from stability to like financial success, having a strong foundation. And in that community, in that West African community here in the Bay Area, they had to set up a shrine. Somebody needed to marry this spirit before they could do other things in the community, before they could set up other shrines. And so she was asked by the elder of her community to step into this marriage and to become a functionary they call them a shrine keeper for Tingan, so that other things could happen. So they arise in a lot of different ways, but I'm getting more and more accounts of, or hearing more and more accounts of people who are interested in stepping into this deep bonded devotional relationship with the spirit and practicing and learning. This is part of what I teach my students, learning the art of wooing, like wooing the deity, wooing the spirit being that you are wanting to step into a deeper bonded relationship with.
Are there any precautions or protocols to be aware of? If so, what are they?
Precautions and protocols really, I think, come down to what I call the 3 Ds of spirit marriage: devotion, discernment, and discipline. We want to devote ourselves really to this relationship as earnestly as one would a human relationship that you're trying to cultivate. I talked about the sort of dating phase, the getting to know them, really being able to then, number two, discern what is this being that I'm in a relationship with? Who are they? What's their agenda? What do they want? Why are we entering into this relationship? And all of the kind of relationship negotiation stuff that you go through with a human person. What is our relationship design? What are our agreements? What are our boundaries, right? Setting boundaries. And it's a discernment is great because we get to push back, right? It's not just about, oh, this holy being that, is so far above me. It's like, no, we bring things to the table that they can't do, and they bring things to the table that we can't do. And the two of us together can create some really powerful projects. And so that discernment piece, I think the other aspect of that is really having great checks and balances, really having a good support team of folks around you. If you're not currently working in a tradition that practices spirit marriage, then getting some folks around you, whether that's like a transpersonal psychotherapist who can really help you discern what's my voice versus what's the voice of, like, say, my culture or the media or other, ancestral voices versus the voice of my spirit beloved. You want to be able to get really clear on all of those different inputs, I like to call them, that are at play, because we've got a myriad of them going on in any given moment. And it's really easy to just assume that, oh, I have this really great idea. It must be coming from my spirit spouse. And then discipline. And that's just the showing up and really developing the relationship and taking the time to do that. Like, we're not rushing things.
What is entheosis, awakening the divine within, and how does it relate to spirit marriage?
Entheosis, the word entheos means theos, divine, and en is within. So it's this idea that we each have a divine self, and each of our divine selves that we are here to manifest is actionable, meaning we can step into, the Hermeticists call it, knowledge and conversation with this divine aspect of ourselves. And so a lot of folks, when I talk about spirit marriage, say, well, I don't have a spirit that's ringing my doorbell wanting to marry me. Now what? And so what I like to say is, well, you might not have this external spirit that is wooing you, but we, each of us, have a divine self that we can step into conversation with. And so I think that some of the more developed forms of entheosis, of awakening the divine within, really classify, or really could be classified as a kind of spirit marriage, right? You're marrying this extraordinary being, which you are a manifestation of, but which you are not the totality of. If anything, we're sort of, like I like to say, we're the fingertip of that being pressing into the physical world, and the rest of that being is much more vast and greater than just, sort of our individual conscious expression of it.
In your book, Megan, you share with your readers in-depth interviews with a number of contemporary practitioners of spirit marriage. You mentioned one previously in our interview, which was fascinating. Is it possible to relate one or two more of them?
I talked about the Shakta Tantra, who's married to Kali. I talked about Madrone, who's married to Tingan. And just by the way, Madrone and Tingan has a physical manifestation, meaning when she married Tingan, she was asked to find a tree because Tingan likes to manifest through trees. So she found this giant ancient redwood tree. And the redwood tree is sort of a proxy for, or her interface point for relationship with Tingan. I interviewed Orion Foxwood, who is a fairy seer. He's actually a mentor of mine. And he was one of the first people when I started having this phenomena manifest for myself. He was one of the first people I turned to because he holds a marriage to a fairy queen, Bree, hence the title House of Bree, fairy seership. And Bree, unlike what most people think of when they think of fairies, like, Disney's Tinkerbell, we approach the fairy people and many of the Celtic traditions, and his specifically comes out of Scotland, approach the fairy people as ancient, wise, primordial beings, sort of the creatrices of human consciousness, or consciousness in general on this planet. And so he's married to one of those beings, Bree, and then I interviewed a whole little constellation of African diaspora spirit marriage practitioners in both Haitian and New Orleans Vodou practices. And they marry beings in their pantheon, which are called Loa, which are the equivalent of deities. In the Vodou practice, you can marry more than one. So I like to say that spirit marriage is sort of, in its essence, a little bit of a polyamorous practice, because that almost everybody that I interviewed had a human partner as well as a spirit marriage, and some had a variety of spirit marriages to more than one being.
In life, there seems to be a yin and yang to just about everything. That also applies to spirit marriages. What are the risks and challenges faced by someone engaging in a spirit marriage?
Well, I think it goes back to those practices and precautions. There is certainly the challenge of self-aggrandizement. I'm so special. I'm beloved of, insert deity name. And therefore, I know everything because so-and-so told me, because my deity told me. And so we have to really, like I said, have the checks and balances that keep us rooted and grounded in the practice, that keep our egos in check. And that's why I think it's so important for the spirit marriage practitioners to be in some sort of a community with other practitioners. So it really helps what I like to call normalizing the paranormal. It really helps normalize these practices, not as something that makes you special or exceptional or better than, but really most of the folks that step into these spirit marriages are in major service roles. They're ministers, they're priests and priestesses, they serve their community and really the planet in some sort of way through their marriage. And I think that's really important to understand, that the pitfalls of self-aggrandizement or competition, right? Well, I'm more beloved by Odin than you are, or well, Ochun likes me better than she likes you. There's really no room for that in this kind of practice, because when we are beloved of a spirit that others are beloved of, we really are in a relationship then with themselves and with each other and with the deity. We may not necessarily like all the other practitioners, but we all have to learn how to get along, right? How to be in our unique individual relationship and then be in that relationship with each other, right? And that's the crossroads of practice.
If someone finds out after committing to a spirit marriage that they're not happy and want out, how do they go about opting out of the relationship? Is it possible to divorce a spirit? If there is, how does one do that?
It also really kind of depends on the spirit. I have heard of practitioners who married a spirit and then later on the relationship wasn't, the boundaries and the relationship design wasn't really working for them, and they were able to divorce the spirit by appealing to higher or more powerful spirit than the one that they'd married, and they were able to go about a divorce that way. But with some spirits, for example, with the Shakta Tantric Kama, who's married to Kali claimed her. And then she sort of had to come to terms with, okay, so this powerful goddess has claimed me, now what? She was definitely looking for a devoted relationship with the deity. She didn't anticipate it was going to be Kali. And when Kali claimed her, she was at first a little, trepidatious about that. And she actually went to an exorcist and was like, so Kali's claimed me and I don't know that I want to be claimed by Kali. Can you kind of undo this? And the exorcist was like, no, ma'am. Like, Kali, if Kali wants you, you need to learn how to come to terms with this. And but what ultimately she told me was that she realized that she had been Kali's for many, many lifetimes, and that Kali was just simply sort of renewing her relationship in this lifetime. And part of her journey to becoming a teacher in that lineage was coming to terms with the relationship she had with Kali.
Earlier in the interview, you had mentioned that there are some people who are married to spirit as well as someone on the physical plane. What I'm curious to know about is, when the person is married to the spirit, do they tell their physical partners on this earth plane about it? Do they keep it a secret? And if they tell it to them, how do they react?
I think that, again, the idea of polyamory, the definition of it is that you have many loving relationships with more than one individual with the consent and knowledge of everybody involved. So I think that that's how spirit marriages work in their most healthy expression, and certainly with the least amount of negative impact on the human relationships, if we're transparent and can talk about this with our beloveds. It certainly helps when your partner, your human partner, is in the tradition that you're practicing and is aware of the spirit marriage potential. And if not, a practicing spirit marriage practitioner themselves has the ability to understand the realms that you're navigating and to share in that kind of way. Although having a spirit marriage is physically different than having, more than one human partner, because that, the spirit marriages are happening either in the encounters with the spirit marriage, or happening either in dreams or in ritual or altered states. And so you can have a very loving, robust, healthy human relationship with a human partner and not really have the spirit marriage impact it all that much if your part of your spiritual practice is communion with the spirit spouse. There are obviously exceptions to that. But what I found, and this was interesting story that I got into with one of the Vodou practitioners, the Haitian Vodou practitioner. She is a Mambo and married to like 3 or 4 different Loa, and her husband is an Ungan, a priest in that tradition, and he's married to 3 or 4 Loa. And in that tradition, you set aside anywhere from 1 night a week to a few nights a month to be with your spirit lovers, and each of them has, or your spirit husband or wife, and each of them has a different day that is devoted to them. So if we're talking about like they're married to like between the 2 of them 5 or 6 spirits, that means there would be no night, and you don't sleep with your human partner, right? In that tradition, you don't sleep with your human partner the night you're with your spirit partner. And so she said, well, that wasn't going to work for us because that meant that we didn't spend any nights together, my husband and I. And so she said, we negotiated with the spirits, and we have 1 night a month that we spend with our spirit spouse, and the rest of the time I get to sleep with my husband. So I love that example because it really shows us how negotiable these relationships are. But also she said, I don't think it would have worked if I was married to somebody who didn't know anything about spirit marriage, didn't understand. And all of a sudden I'm like, so I'm not going to sleep with you every Tuesday because I'm sleeping with my Loa over here. So she said she had been in relationships with non-practitioners in the past, and she said they didn't work out so well. So it really helps to have somebody who practices or at least understands your spirituality enough to give you the space to do that.
You, Megan, are very open in discussing the details of your own spirit marriage. When and how did it come about, and how has it affected your everyday life on the physical plane?
About 20 years ago, I began to have dreams where a spirit lover would show up, and eventually that spirit lover asked me to marry. And at that time, I really had no context for what was going on. I had gone to seminary and I'd done a master's in religion, and I knew about the sort of religious and folkloric accounts of spirit marriage, but I had no idea that it was still happening today, right? I thought those were origin myths. So when this encounter happened, and it happened more than once, it happened repeatedly. So I got really curious and I started researching it, and eventually researching it led me to initiate in the Shakta Tantric and ceremonial magic, and to find my first spirit marriage teacher, Orion Foxwood, who I talked about a little earlier. And that really helped me sort of get the practices underneath me that helped me do the devotional and the discernment and the discipline. And over time, it became clear that what I was working on researching this wasn't just for myself, that as an academic and as a scholar, but as a practitioner, that there were other people out there that were having these encounters and experiences. And, back when it first occurred to me 20 years ago, I couldn't really find anything. No books were written. There was very little about it online, at least that portrayed it as a positive thing. A lot of it was just sort of fear and danger, danger, danger. And so I decided that I would undertake the research project. And that's really what became, like I said, the dissertation for my PhD in psychology, and then became this book, was this journey to kind of, what would I want to know 20 years ago about all of this that would have helped me really understand and support me in finding good resources and good material about spirit marriage. So that's kind of how it unfolded. And I think that my contact really used the framework of research to help me cultivate my own relationship, because I went around, as you've said, and I talked to 9 different practitioners in 7 different traditions, asking them questions that I couldn't answer for myself yet. So I was like, well, what is the cosmology of your being, and how did you know, and who supported you, and how did you get married, and all those sorts of questions, because I was trying to figure it out for myself.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Spirit Marriage, Intimate Relationships with Otherworldly Beings, or any of your other books, how do they go about doing that?
If you go to my website, and then if you want to learn more about my courses and myself as a eco-spiritual practitioner and teacher, you can go to drmeganrose.com, which is drmeganrose.com.
Megan Rose, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. I wish you success with Spirit Marriage. That includes both the book you've written that has Spirit Marriage in its title and your own personal Spirit Marriage.
Thank you so much, Stan. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure you don't miss any interviews on my free YouTube channel, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.